Hello guys, this is Cryptocious again with another lesson. This is lesson number 3, Basic Pawn Endgames. This lesson is very important because you will be able to connect some of the dots that we learned from the lesson number 2, that was Basic Mates. In the past lesson we learned how to mate with a rook, how to mate with a queen, and how to mate with two bishops. And I hope you practice the technique like I taught you against the machine, against Stockfish 8. And in this lesson, I will show you how to play these 4 basic pawn endings. The idea is that you want to queen this pawn. You want to queen, get a queen and do the mate that you already know from the past lessons. But these 4 positions are really important. Are like those 4 mates. You need to know them really, really well. Because you will win a lot of games with this technique, and you will draw a lot of games with this technique. So let's start with the first position. It's king and pawn against king. This is a very basic position, and right away I will tell you that no matter who plays here, this position is draw. White cannot win even with a pawn up. So most of the time the only thing you need to win a game of chess is to be a pawn up. You trade all the pieces and you get to a king and pawn against king position. But unfortunately in this one the black king is already in front of the pawn, and it can go and take the opposition like we talk a lot of about that concept in a previous lesson. So if you are defending the position, this is what you wanna get. You want to have 2 priorities: get the opposition and get in front of the pawn. If you can do that, the position is draw. No one can beat you, not even Stockfish, and I will prove that to you. So let's see the technique. So in this position, white plays. He plays e3, and now, like I told you, if you cannot take the opposition, you will stay behind the pawn. So here we cannot take the opposition because this pawn is covering the square. So we will simply move back behind the pawn. See? Always behind the pawn. So he moved king d3, king forward, and now we can take the opposition. See? Now we play king d5, opposition. White turns, e4, check. We have to get away of the opposition, but we can go behind the pawn. King e5. He played king e3, trying to lose the tempo, so we get out of behind the pawn. But we move backwards, still behind the pawns, but backwards. See, we're always trying to get in this file behind the pawn, and if we cannot, we're gonna go with the opposition. So black plays king f4, and we go opposition. e5 check, behind the pawn. e4, we go backwards, behind the pawn. King d5, opposition. e6, behind the pawn. e5, behind the pawn. King d6, king d8, opposition. He will check, behind the pawn. And here he plays king e6, and the game is drawn. It's drawn because we cannot move. See, we cannot go back anymore. We're at the edge of the board. We cannot go here or here because we are in check from the pawn. And we cannot go here or here because we are in check from the king. So this is what it's called a stalemate. Why? Because we're not in check. We cannot move anymore, but we are not in check, so it's not checkmate. It's called stalemate. So that's how you draw this position. That's how you draw. The other way, see here, when he gives the e7 check and we go behind the pawn, if he doesn't go here like in this diagram and he goes, let's say, here, then we eat the pawn and it's draw, because the kings cannot eat each other. See, there is like the kings will never go like in contact with each other. There is like, if you visualize like a magnetic field here or something, but this is the closest that we'll ever get. See, he cannot go here because you're in check from here. You cannot go here because you're in checking here. So this is like this. I visualize it like a magnetic field. You know, they cannot come. This is the closest that will get each other. But the thing is that there's no any remaining pieces, so we don't have pawns to queen, so the game is automatically draw. If you eat all the pieces and you get to this position, it's just draw. So here we played king a8 and he stalemated because we cannot move anywhere and we're not in check. So let's go really quick again. Now we're gonna go a little bit faster. I just want you to see the technique. Behind the pawn and opposition. e3, behind the pawn. He advanced the king to support, opposition. e4 check, behind the pawn. Behind the pawn. Opposition. Behind the pawn. King e7, king e5, opposition, check. Behind the pawn, opposition, e7 check, and we go the last time behind the pawn. Now if he goes here, it's stalemate. If he goes here, we hit the pawn and it's draw. So this position, you need to learn it. You need to learn it. So what you will do is you will set up the board like I taught you and play this as black against stockfish. And I will go again when we finish the 4 examples how to set up the board. Okay, so how do we win the position with a pawn up? We saw in the last example that the black king was in front of the pawn, and that was the technique to draw the game. So to win the game, white must avoid the black king to get in front of the pawn. So as you see in this position, the black king is back here, it's nowhere near the back of the pawn. Right, it's giving us the opposite. It's giving us the opposition, but we are in front of the pawn. That's what we need to aim to win this, to make this pawn go all the way, to promote to queen, and then to give the mate that you already know. So the technique is in front of the pawn and controlling the promoting squares. So we play king a4, king e6, he's taking the position, but look at this, e3. Now we have a tempo with our pawn, so he will drop the opposition and we can control the forward squares. King f6, king d5. See, we are exerting pressure in these squares where our pawn will move forward. That's the technique. So he go back into the pawn trying to draw, but we go in front of the pawn with the tempo. So in case that we need to use that tempo to get him out of opposition, we use it. And now we go here, again controlling the squares that the pawn will use to advance. Now we can start moving our pawn forward. e4, king d7, e5, king a8. So we need to now, the only square that we need to control is this square where the black king is. If we control that square with our king, then we promote the pawn. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna, in front of the pawn, a position. He needs to move out of that square, and we control that square. King f7, king e6 check, king f8, e7 check, king f7, and we queen the pawn. Queen, and he moved king g8, and now you do the mate of the king and queen. So let's do this again really quickly. This is the starting position. Like I told you, your technique is to be in front of the pawn to have that tempo and to control the squares where the pawn will move to queen. So in front of the pawn, he goes to position. We move the pawn forward with the tempo, so he has to get out of position. We control the forward squares. Opposition. We control the forward squares. Now we start advancing the pawn, and we are gonna, when we get our pawn near, we're gonna control that square. e5, king a8. Okay, so here the move, as you saw, is this one, opposition, to get the king out of this square, and we control it. But if we play here e6 instead of opposition and king in front of the pawn, look what happened. He will get the opposition and he will draw. Because now, remember this position? This is the position of our last diagram. That now we need to move, and we either stalemate if we move here, or if we move here, he hits the pawn. So see why you need to learn the details of these two positions. You need to practice it with the machine, and you need to learn the concept. Try to visualize it. That's why I'm trying to explain it to you. So in this position, I told you we're gonna in front of the pawn and opposition. So here the logical move is opposition, right? But look what an automatic move can do to you. A one position, suddenly a draw. So always in front of the pawn and opposition, because the objective is to control the queen in square. Right now the queen in square is controlled by the king, so we'll move him out. King f8, and now we control the square. We queen, he moves, and we give the king and queen mate. So a brief summary. Remember to if you're winning, if you want to win the position, you need to get the king in front of your pawn. If you want to draw the position, you need to get the king in front of the pawn. Though that's the technique. These two diagrams, set it up with the computer and practice it until you master it. Try to think about the concept that we discussed. Okay, let's see the next example. In this position, we have two pawns, and black has one pawn. So how do we win this position? Well, like in the last example, first we need to control the queen in squares, which right now are controlled by the enemy king. So we need to do a maneuver so we get the king out of there, and our pawns can advance. So we do that maneuver with the king, and it's called outflanking. We're gonna get that king out of there. So Following that plan, it doesn't make much sense to do a move like f6 because that doesn't accomplish getting that king out of there. So we're playing king d7. We control the square. So the king has to go back. King g8, king e7. Now we control one of the queen squares. We have part of our plan is already accomplished, but we want more. We want this square also, so this pawn can queen. He plays king h8, and now we play f6. We do not play right away this move because stalemate. See, he cannot move here because the king is here. He cannot move here because the pawn. So what we do is that we sacrifice a pawn, so he has a piece to move. G takes f6, and now we control this square and this square, the queen in squares, but he has a move now. See, he can move the pawn, f5, and now we play g7, check, king h7, we queen. See how this work out, that he's already cut off. Queen g6, mate. Pretty nice, huh? Let's go again and see it one more time. Like I told you, our objective is to control the queen in squares. So we are gonna outflank the king. King d7, king g8, king e7, controlling the square, king h8, and now you're gonna watch out because if you play king f7, it's stalemate. So we don't want that. What we want is to control the square. So we give him a move, a pawn, so he can move, and now we play king f7, controlling the queen in square. Now he has a piece to move, f5. He's gonna try to queen, but we're much advanced, and we're gonna mate him before he can queen. g7 check, king a7, g8 queen. He's already cut off. Queen h6, queen g6 mate. Okay, so in this last diagram that we're gonna see in today's lesson, we are again 2 pawns against 1 pawn. So the plan here, as we already discussed, is always to control the queen in square with the king, but we first gonna pass a pawn. So we play king f4, king e6, f5 check, king f6, king f4, he plays g6. We don't want to trade pawns yet. We want to pass a pawn first. So he plays g5, intermediate move, check, king f7, f6. Now we pass a pawn. So the next step is to outflank this king and control the queen in square. Even if we have to sacrifice a pawn, we already saw in the last diagram that we sacrifice a pawn to obtain control of the queen in square. So we might have to do that here again. King e6, king e4 opposition, king f7, king e5, king f8. So now how do we make more progress in this position? We're gonna sacrifice a pawn to outflank the enemy king. We already saw in last diagram how strong it is when we outflank him and we get control of the queen in square. So as long as you can maintain the opposition, king d6, king f8, king e6, king g7, opposition. King G8. We attack the pawn now. King A7. Opposition. King H8. And King G6. We recover the pawn that we sacrificed. And look what we have here. King in front of the pawn. We already know that that's what we want in these pawn endgames to win. If we have the king in front of the pawn, we're going to win it. King G8. King H6. King H8. G6. King G8. G7. He cannot go back and take opposition, so he needs to leave the queen in square. And we control that square now. Queen, and you give the king and queen mate. So these positions, these 4 positions, I want you to practice it against Stockfish. And at the first position, you're gonna play with black, the one that we discussed, and you're gonna apply the defensive technique that the king was in front of the pawn. You should not lose that position. That position is draw. So once you stay in front of the pawn and you maintain the position, you're gonna draw that position a pawn down. And the other 3 positions, you should be able to win it once you practice and master the technique that we discussed. So thank you. This has been lesson number 3. Basic pawn endgames. We discussed in this lesson 1 pawn against 0 and 2 pawns against 1. In the next lesson, we'll probably discuss 3 pawns against 2 pawns, and we are gonna start with some basic rook endings that you need to know too. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned some pawn endgames. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the content and you feel like you're learning something.